Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us at our special COVID-19 Q&A webinar today. I'm your host, Amy. Before we begin, I just want to go through some housekeeping with you. As there are quite a lot of you with us, you will all be put on mute to reduce the background noise and any disruptions. Should you wish to ask a question, please type the question in the chat box or raise your hand and I'll unmute you one at a time. If we don't get through all the questions within the hour, we will make sure they are answered via email and shared with all of our listeners. I'd like to now introduce you to our panelists. We have Natalie Mill, who sits in the Workplace Relations team here in Melbourne. Natalie has a background in industrial relations, and before coming over to Nika, she was working for the Fair Work Ombudsman. Joining with her today is Nika Victoria's HSEQ manager, Peter Tsoubos. Peter has a background in both electrical and OH&S. Peter has previously worked as an operations engineering manager in manufacturing, health, aviation, petrochemical, and retail fields. I can see a lot of questions are flowing through, so we'll get started with that. This one's for you, Peter. With the new restrictions on social distancing, does this affect our workers attending jobs or worksite in one vehicle?
Thanks, Amy, and good morning, everybody. Essentially, yes, it does. So employers still need to adhere to the social distancing rules and guidelines that are in place. So essentially, if you're a two-seater vehicle, it should only really be one person per vehicle. If you've got a 4 or 5-seater with a rear seat, you can have a second person in that vehicle. Good practice would be that work vehicle is cleaned on a regular basis at the end of the day with disinfectant wiped down. Also, good practice would be that the passenger wear disposable gloves to reduce touch point spread, and those gloves be removed and disposed of once they've got out the vehicle. And it would be also good practice that both the driver and the passenger wear a P2 mask. That's just really to stop any droplet spread that might occur if one of the people in the vehicles may be COVID positive but don't know it at that particular point of time.
Thanks, Peter. Looks like we've got another question coming in. Looks like this one's for you, Nat. What do we do if an employee appears to be unwell and suffering from flu-like symptoms?
Good morning, everyone. So if an employee is unwell and they're showing signs of either cold or flu-like symptoms, they should seek medical attention quite urgently, obviously. So they can contact their doctor and seek advice as to whether they're required to self-isolate or isolate for a period of time. Now, if that request is, if you request that they go off and seek a clearance, then that time does actually need to be paid as normal, unless the employee is found to be unfit for work and not cleared to return to work, in which case that time will come from their personal or sick leave balance. And obviously, if they're unfit for work, they will take the recommended period off, which would generally be 14 days after they've had any symptoms. And if in the case that you do send them off for a medical clearance, they're actually cleared, they should return to work as normal, and that time that they had to take off work should be paid as normal, so it won't come from their personal or sick leave balance.
Thanks, Nat. We've got another question here for you, Peter. Can you share what is required from a WHS point of view for an operational business in these challenging times?
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose firstly, I'd probably say to all the employers out there, the best thing you can do in this situation is be really honest and open with your workers and treat them how you'd like to be treated. I think we're not sure how long this is going to go on for, but when it's over, the relationships that you're going to build now during these times are probably going to reward you later on with employees that will probably want to bend over backwards and do the best they can for you. So from an OH&S perspective, though, it's actually just business as usual. So while we've put a pause on a lot of other things, all the laws and the regulations around health and safety still apply, and that also includes the upcoming industrial manslaughter laws. So everything still carries on as normal. So as a business owner, you've still got to maintain a safe workplace, liaise with your staff, monitor working conditions, train them, provide information, do all the things that you've probably been doing anyway if you've got a good safe system of work or you're using our HSEQ package. And just make sure you're assessing the risks of COVID-19 in the workplace and putting mitigations in place, i.e. social distancing and other things like that. And I think it's really also important as a manager that you lead by example. So again, that's a really good thing to be doing at this particular time. So again, if you're wanting your staff to wear a mask when they're driving a vehicle, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing the same thing during working hours. And make sure that you're doing the right thing around social distancing as well.
Perfect. We've got another question here. We just had 2 jobs come in where both households have confirmed cases of COVID. The last one said they would not be retesting his wife. How long after confirmed diagnosis can we send our team in?
Well, they need to have a clearance, essentially, to demonstrate that they haven't got the symptoms. That said, I mean, if you still want to go in and potentially do the work in that particular building, it's going to be similar to what's happening in medical facilities where can the person that's isolating be removed from the area that you're going to work in? Can that area be cleaned and sterilised, or is that something you might need to do, wipe it down before you commence work? Are you going to be wearing appropriate PPE, gloves, mask? By the way, if you're wearing a mask and you want to use that to protect yourself, you need to be, as a male, clean shaven. Otherwise, the mask doesn't fulfill the requirements. You need to then go to a proper, almost like a scuba style breathing mask that covers your face properly. So there's a few issues that you need to consider around that, I suppose. Bearing in mind the current advice is that I read last night, the COVID-19 virus will stay on a surface for up to 3 hours if it's plastic and an hour if it's cardboard. So that's why it's all been prescribed to wipe down surfaces with a disinfectant because it breaks it down very quickly. So best practice would be to do something like that if you want to go, but you want to have good practices. And of course, if you're going to send your staff in there, you need to obviously make sure your staff are trained on how to clean that surface down properly, how to put on the PPE and wear it properly, and more importantly, how to take off the PPE, because a lot of medical workers, for example, have been infected by removing the PPE incorrectly and infecting themselves with the COVID that's been on the PPE.
Thanks, Peter. We've got another question here. Looks like it's for you, Nat. If staff are on leave without pay, do they still accrue leave under the Electrical and Commissions Award? Comms Award.
It will depend. So typically in any period of unpaid leave under the Fair Work Act, an employee will not continue to accrue their leave entitlements. However, in certain circumstances relating to COVID, you may actually be able to stand your employees down without payment under Section 524 of the Act. If it's a stand down, and we can go into that in a bit more detail later on, perhaps, if it is a stand down, the employee does continue to accrue their entitlements, and that stand down period does form part of their continuous service with you as a business. So that would be all your entitlements: personal leave, annual leave, long service leave, that will continue to accrue at that time.
Thanks, Nat. Looks like we've got another one here for you, Nat. Are public holidays payable under unpaid stand down?
Yes, they will be. Yes. It's slightly different to, as I mentioned before, your typical unpaid period of leave where if a public holiday falls in an unpaid period of leave and it's on either side of that public holiday is unpaid leave, then you won't be entitled to payment for that day. However, in this case, in a stand down period, they would be. So it's just important to get it right, because it's not always going to be a stand down period. You would still need to meet the relevant criteria to first stand your employees down, and then that's when that would be paid. So it's important not to confuse that with just a sort of flexible arrangement that you've put in place with an employee. You know, if you've seen a downturn in business and you're starting to talk about solutions such as taking leave, whether it be unpaid or paid, or reducing hours and things like that, that's going to be very different to a stand down. Yes. Thanks, Amy.
Okay, thank you. Peter, this is another question on to the first question we had for you. We've got a question here. I really need to know how long after the customer was diagnosed as this is our issue right now. So how long after the customer is diagnosed that they can send their team in?
Well, they need to get that clearance from the doctor, I suppose. And what seems to be happening at the moment, and it seems to be best practice, is most people are tending to get 2 tests. They're getting a first test that comes back negative, and then 2 days later they're getting a second one. So they're having their 14 days if they're in quarantine at home, and they're having a test at the end of that 14th day, and then it looks like they're having one at the moment on the 16th day to get a clearance. So I would say that best practice at the moment is you're looking at least 2 weeks.
Thanks, Peter. We've got another question here. Confirm the statement about coming back to work if they've had a cough or cold with a cleared medical certificate is not sick leave. So just confirm that it's not, I think this is for you, Nat, confirm that it's not sick leave.
So if they are cleared to return to work and there's no issue, a medical practitioner has assessed the situation and assessed the employee and sees that they are actually fit to return to work, then they are able to do so, and they would continue to be paid as normal. I think maybe the confusion was that period had the employee been found to be unfit for work, whether it be COVID related or just, you know, a common cold or any other illness or injury, that time would otherwise be deducted from their personal leave balance, and that's when they would move on to personal or sick leave. But if they're returning to work and you've basically sent them off to get this clearance just to ensure that your other, you know, your employees and your client are all safe and the safety of the workplace, then that time is going to be on the company, so it's going to be paid as per normal.
Thanks, Nat. I've got Mirko here wanting to ask a question. I'm going to unmute you, Mirko. Just give me a second.
Hello, Kira.
How are you going?
Good. Thank you. I'm at the job in one of the private houses in Templestock. Doing myself, I have one subcontractor with me, which is not today with me. Anyway, everybody's talking about the disinfecting stuff and things like that. I got the builder, the owner, and he hasn't got proper procedure. And I sent him email just to make sure we have basic protection, 1.5 meter and so on, and a bit of disinfectant. My question this time, which I had trouble finding those disinfectant in supermarkets. I went round and some of them sold out. My wife managed to find one of those pumps, and actually I had some methyl spirit and put it in my. I used one of the disposable what is called those spray for the glasses. I emptied that one and put a metallized spirit and went to one job in my neighborhood, and I sprayed the switch where I was touching in the switchboard. The paint came on my hand. So my question is, what we can use to make proper disinfectant for coronavirus. I did come across some. I went to the painter shop as well. I bought a liter of methyl spirit, and he showed me another. It's got ethanol that used for paint cleaning, and it suggested that I use 70% ethanol, 30% water, and I just add a little bit tea tree oil or gum tree oil, what is called eucalyptus oil, just for the smell, and that works well. And just tell me what's the best. Do you have any idea what's the best?
Mark, I can answer that for you.
Oh, thanks, Peter.
Good old soap and water is just as good, it's just as effective. It's the COVID-19 is a lipid soluble bacteria, and so any good soap and water will do it. It's more around the contact of the soap, so it's about making sure that if you haven't got the pump, because the pump stuff is as quick and easy to use, but the soap and water, use that. Just wash your hands for a good 20 seconds with the soap and water. Make sure you really soap up your hands. That'll do exactly the same job. Don't worry about using related spirits. Soap and water just is just as effective.
Yeah. What about when we're working on the site and everybody's touching? I had plumber, can you hold this for me? I said coronavirus. And using mixing the tools, using my leather, and you're touching the leather, so it's not very practical to use water and soap. So I would be probably more comfortable with the spray.
Well, the other thing you can use too is disposable gloves. So you buy some disposable gloves, and everyone wears that. And that way, and the other good practice is you try and minimise sharing of equipment and tools, because obviously touch points are critical. So if you've got your ladder and the plumber wants to borrow your ladder, well, the plumber probably needs to get his own ladder to do the work at the moment, because everyone should be using their own equipment. And even things like...
Yeah, that's right. But that sometimes that happen, and I find this spray very handy. But I just want to know what the percentage of dilution is safe to use.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't be mixing up my own product at the moment. I'd just be using the stuff that's available. Even things like your Pino Clean sprays and things that you wipe down the benches, that kills the virus as well. 99%. You can go and buy that. That's freely available, that stuff.
All right, thanks, Peter. I appreciate that.
All right, thanks for that one, Mirko. We've got a few more questions coming in here. Looks like this one's for you, Nat. Do you have to pay super and CoinVest 2.7% on job seeker payments?
On the JobKeeper payments?
Yes.
I believe you will. Or it's going to depend if that's ordinary time earnings. No, actually thinking about it now, and I will maybe put together a bit of documentation on super and tax obligations to follow this, so I can send that through and circulate that to everyone. But based on the fact that entitlement or that payment is going to come through when an employee is stood down without payment from the employer, I believe it's going to be it's not going to form part of their OTE or their ordinary time earnings, and therefore wouldn't attract super. But I will put together a document and then circulate that to follow this. That's a good question.
Okay. Thank you. We've got another question here. Looks like it's for you, Nat, as well. Is stand down lawful if a business has shut their office but continues to operate and requires employees to WFH, but the employee has been stood down due to not having the appropriate technology, i.e. company set up laptop to work from home?
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, look, with the stand down under Section 524 of the Act, basically an employer needs to demonstrate that employees could not be usefully employed during that time, and there was a stoppage of work for a cause that the employer cannot reasonably be held responsible. So some sort of clear examples of that is if there's a government directive, this site must shut down. So that's very clear. Where it becomes a little bit unclear is when there's different parts of the business that can operate and others that can't. If the business, for example, majority of employees are required to quarantine, for example, and therefore there's no productive work that other employees can work on it during that time, then that would be grounds for a stand down for all staff. And it may be that particular parts of your business are not able to operate, and that could also be a stand down. But it really comes back to demonstrating that you have had to stop work, and it's not something that you could reasonably control. So while this is all pretty new, and you know, the Fair Work Commission and Ombudsman have all come out and said, you know, this is new. We're looking at implementing certain clauses, such as pandemic clause is being looked into at the moment. We've got to work with what we've got, and there's going to be some flexibility around these things. However, I would say that if you're just suffering a downturn in business that's resulted from the coronavirus, it's probably going to be more appropriate to start looking at, okay, do we need to restructure, or do we need to offer some, you know, leave options for this time just to get us over the tricky period. So yes, that would be my response to that. I hope that answers that question. Let me know if not.
Thank you, Nat. Another question coming in for you now. If an employee opts not to work out of concern of the virus and people in their household after leave entitlements, do they go on to unpaid leave?
It'll depend on the circumstances, so it's a bit of a case by case. If the employee is just electing to stay home or has requested to stay home because they're not entirely comfortable with coming into the office or to the site or whatever it may be, then they can look to request a flexible working arrangement, such as working from home. And really best practice at the moment is where you can have employees work from home, go ahead and do it. So I think it's really important for employers to reasonably consider these requests. Obviously, there's going to be times when you're not able to. So in that case, if this individual didn't have the ability to work from home or capability from an IT perspective or whatever it may be, then they could potentially request some leave, which might be annual leave or long service leave. And then you can consider that from a business point of view, whether you can accommodate that. I guess if there's someone affected in the house or someone is unwell, the employee in some cases will need to take some personal leave. So carers leave, which falls under the personal leave umbrella. And then that's just, you know, the regular evidence requirements that would apply. So basically, an employee can take sick and carers leave for time off to deal with their own personal illness or a family member or someone in their household, or for a family emergency that arises. So that could be something in relation to the coronavirus as well.
Thanks, Nat.
Amy, could
yeah.
I also just add to that under health and safety laws, a worker does have the right to refuse or stop work if they've got a reasonable concern that they might be exposed to a serious risk to their health and safety. And if they have that, they can obviously try and resolve it with the manager in the first instance, but they could also then contact WorkSafe about something like that as well. And obviously the employer might want to contact us as well. So there are sort of trigger points for employees to make sure that they're always working safely. But that's why it's really critical that employers continue to consult with their workers about all the work tasks that they're doing and the safety mechanisms that they've got in place to protect the workers.
Thanks, Peter. Very valuable information. We've got another question here for you, Nat. If the company received JobKeeper payments but provided 3 days work per week, how should the balance be paid to an employee to make up the $1,500 per fortnight, assuming the balance is not paid with entitlements?
Thanks, Amy. My understanding at the moment is that the JobKeeper payment will apply where an employee is stood down. So if you've potentially reduced hours, they may not be eligible. In the case that they're still working during that period, I believe it's just going to be that you would pay the balance. So it's a flat payment of $1,500 per fortnight. So any shortfall, I would imagine, would come from the business. But my understanding is that it wouldn't actually apply as they were still working, but I can confirm that as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Nat. We've got another question that has come in here. Feel free to answer this one, Nat or Peter. We have 3 staff members who remain working in our office. They're maintaining social distance requirements. Example, desks are more than 1.5 metres apart, only one person using the kitchen facilities at a time. Kitchen facilities are cleaned after each use. Are you able to advise your understanding should the following occur? One of these employees is notified they've been in contact with someone who has been confirmed to having the virus. Obviously, they would need to self-isolate for 14 days, but what would be the requirement of the remaining 2 workers? Would they also have to self-isolate for 2 weeks and we close down the office?
I can answer that one, Amy. If you've been in contact with somebody who has now tested positive, even if you've been maintaining 1.5 metre distancing and cleaning, you'll most likely have to go into a 14-day self-quarantine yourself. What will happen is the tracking team will obviously contact all the people that have been in contact with the positive case, and they will make that assessment after discussion, but likely you'll go into a 14-day quarantine period, and if you don't show signs of any illness after that period of time, you'll be free again. But it is changing, as Nat mentioned, so the rules around testing are changing. So what the team might also decide to do is to test you as well. They then decide to test you. If it comes back negative within 4 to 48 hours, you'll be right to maintain. But you'll certainly have to isolate for a period of time. And while you're isolating, there's no reason you can't work from home if you are working from an office and you're so set up to do so. So I think it's important again for managers to look at how their workers are working, and if they're working from an office space, can they set them up to work from home? Because best practice would be to have people not attending work but working from home at the moment to not only maintain 1.5 metres but maintain a bit more of a self-isolating scenario.
Thanks, Peter. Another question for you, Nat. Is leave without pay, stand down, the same thing?
Thanks, Amy. No, short answer is no. It is slightly different, and that is why the accruals and other entitlements are going to be different during any stand down period.
Okay. Another question here for you, Nat. If a casual does not usually earn over $400 per week, but I choose to pay them the JobKeeper subsidy, then do I have to pay them super on the whole $750 per week?
Thanks, Amy. It is up to an employer as to whether they make the extra super contributions. So generally, the minimum obligation is based on their regular earnings. So for a casual, that's going to be a little bit more fluid. But if you have a part-time or full-time employee or any employee, and they're actually going to be receiving more with the JobKeeper payments, then it's at employer discretion as to whether that's forms part of their ordinary time earnings. Yeah, so just going back to that super contribution, it will apply on their ordinary time earnings. I don't think I fully clarified that earlier. However, if they're actually receiving more, it's at the employer's discretion.
Thanks, Natalie. Looks like we've got a few more questions here for you, Natalie. I'll start off with the first one. So do you have to stand down employees to get JobSeeker for them?
At the moment, the information that we've been provided is that the JobKeeper payments will only apply during a stand down period, but that could change. Or there may be other packages that are released for employees that suffer some sort of reduction in their hours or another change to their employment conditions. And we'll be keeping members informed with that. But at the moment, yeah, it appears that the JobKeeper payment is only applicable for anyone in the stand down.
Okay. What is the official way to stand down an employee?
So with a stand down, it's very important that consultation is key, really. You want to make sure that at all stages you are keeping your employees informed. Obviously, there's going to be information that's coming through and fresh to you as well, but if you can keep them informed throughout the whole process, that's great. A lot of these decisions are going to might be quite quick. So, for example, in the case and, worst case that everyone or all sites were forced to shut down, that's going to be something that directive from the government is going to come through, and as contractors you're going to have to act quite quickly. But the Fair Work Act states that if there's any notice or consultation requirements within your industrial instrument, so either the award that applies, for most of our members that's going to be the electrical award, or the EBA, then those notice and consultation requirements do need to be followed. I would probably start the conversation sooner rather than later. So as I said, that your employees are informed. So even if you don't have to stand them down now, or you haven't to stop work now, it might be worth sort of introducing that into the conversation so that they're aware that that may happen in the future. We have put together some guides for your internal correspondence as well that you can use around some of this stuff. So discussing solutions, I guess, to any downturn in business that is currently facing. So that includes leave, reduction in hours, and stand down periods. So please get in touch if that's of interest to you, and we can supply that to you.
Okay, thanks, Nat. Another one here for you. If an employee agrees to leave without pay for hours not worked because there is no work, are they entitled to JobSeeker payment for the balance of hours not worked up to 1,500 a fortnight?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Here's another question for you, Peter, in relation to a question you answered earlier. The comment about the office staff working together. What about all outside staff in relation to if one has been contacted as being in contact with COVID-19 case?
Well, in that situation, again, if there's a confirmed case, the quarantine or the tracking team will make contact with everybody on that particular work site. So again, that's why it's really important to have on a work site sign-in and sign-out procedures so people know who's on that site on those particular days. And that team will contact all those people. And initially, as it's been said in the media a lot, if you're not displaying anything at the moment, you probably haven't got anything. But what they will likely do is ask you to self-quarantine for a period of 14 days. They will make that assessment based on the medical evidence that they have. And that's why there's a whole team of nurses and doctors around Australia performing that function. So they'll ask you those questions on whether you need to self-quarantine. And based on that directive, you'll need to go into self-quarantine. Now, obviously, some people, again, they might determine that because of the contact might be even closer, they might want to fast track a sample from those particular people while they're in self-quarantine and then take the result of that further.
Thanks, Peter. Another question for you, Nat. If you're still operating for essential services, can you stand down some staff and not all staff so you can still attend the skeleton work coming from essential service?
Provided that you could demonstrate that those staff or that work in that area must stop, and it's something that is outside of your control, there is nothing that would prevent you from doing that. And then you would just go through the regular requirements to consult that portion of your workforce.
Thanks, Nat. Another one here for you. If our turnover doesn't drop 30% required for the business to receive the government subsidies, but we feel it necessary to stand down one staff member, would they be eligible to the JobKeeper payment?
If the individual is terminated, so they are made redundant, they may be eligible only if you rehire them, I believe. So if they're terminated or they're made redundant, that ends their employment with you, and you would therefore not have the obligation to pass on any payments that do come through. That doesn't sound like a typical stand down. That sounds more as though you're making sort of adjustments to your workforce based on downturn in business.
Thanks, Nat. A question for you, Peter. What safety advice would you give for workers who remain working both in the office and in the field?
Under that scenario, look, I would say that the practices that have been discussed and promoted widely, things like good hand hygiene, ensuring you're maintaining social distancing, making sure the areas that you're working in are cleaned on a regular basis, looking to change your work habits so there are less people in the workspace where you're working, ensuring no person-to-person contact, changing how, if you are going to work, changing how you're going to work. Obviously one person in a vehicle, look to use PPE and make sure you know how to wear it, and continue to speak, from managers to speak to employees, and employees continually to speak to managers. And I would encourage everybody to themselves, download the government app on COVID-19, because that provides a lot of good information. There is a lot of information out in the ether about it. My advice to everyone is just to find one good source and stick to that one source, because all the different TV stations are getting all their experts on saying what should and shouldn't happen. I personally am listening to the advice of the Chief Health Officer. So what the Chief Health Officer and that particular team of state health officers are advising, that's what I'm sort of looking towards doing, because obviously that's the best practice. So those are the sort of things I'd be doing, and just continue to have ongoing discussions with your staff and your workers about how we improve safety in the workplace, because consultation with workers is critical, and workers will have a lot of good ideas about things that they can do and ways that they can work differently to help reduce the spread of the virus in the workplace.
Thanks, Peter. This is a question for both of you. Nat, I'll throw it to you first. How do we manage our employees in this crisis? They're frightened and some don't want to come to work.
Thanks, Amy. Look, I think Peter covered this pretty well earlier as well. At the end of the day, it's very uncertain times, and that's going to have an impact on how your workers are feeling. It could also impact their performance as well, and most likely will. So it's very important to manage it. I think it's about being flexible with your workforce, keeping them informed, and making sure that, you know, if you're noticing that they're a bit flat on one particular day, pull them aside and have a chat to them, and you know, you might look to offer them a couple of days of leave if that's what they would like, but it's just about talking to them and keeping the lines of communication open, I would say. Pete, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, again, it's about treating people how you'd like to be treated yourself. So I think it's, in this uncertain times, the best thing you do is be open and honest with people about the situation of your business at the moment, how much work you've got, and what you're trying to do to help people continue to work, you know, and what you're trying to do to make sure that your business is ongoing. I mean, yeah, it's okay for you to say, look, you know, I'm a bit concerned about it as well, because just like you are, because, you know, I've got family working in other areas, and I'm worried about what's going to happen to the longer term status of the business. So being vulnerable yourself is a good thing, because I think we all are at this particular point of time. So again, being open and honest and flexible, as Natalie said, you know, about talking to people about what you can offer them, what you can't offer them, and what they're entitled to. You know, in some circumstances, depending on how your business is structured and how much work you've got, it may be the best thing to look to stand down people so they get access to the JobKeeper allowance immediately. In other cases, it may not be. So consulting with us about what you can do for your business, and keeping up to date with things that are changing, because it is changing every day at the moment, as we're seeing.
Thanks, Peter. Another question's come in. This is probably for you, Nat. Hi, I'm an electrical contractor with Proprietary Limited, and I'm the only employee of the business. What financial support can I receive if there is a downturn in business?
Thanks, Amy. So there is, we have put together a guide on financial support for contractors, and that does include sole contractors. So essentially there's assistance available through Centrelink, but you need to meet the relevant requirements. The JobKeeper payment is, you will also be eligible provided you meet the criteria. So sole traders may be eligible to receive the JobKeeper payment if the turnover has reduced, and you would just need to demonstrate that that has occurred. So I believe that the same sort of obligations apply in terms of actually demonstrating that loss in turnover, in that it is a comparison to the previous month, or the month in the previous year. So the eligibility for that payment is going to be the same. So it's, or the payment itself, sorry, is the $1,500 per fortnight up to a maximum of 6 months. So that would be available to you, provided you meet the criteria. Outside of that, I would suggest contacting your accountant and just having a look at what is actually available for you based on your how you've been tracking as a business, because it is going to come down to, you know, how much you lost and what your financial circumstances are. So yeah, best to have a chat to your accountant and then just keep up to date with the relevant government releases.
Thanks, Nat. I've got a question here for you, Peter. Does the NICA HSEQ management system cover toolbox talks or info related to minimising coronavirus risk in the workplace?
Thanks, Amy. Yes, we've added some documents around coronavirus and infection control. So there is the toolbox talk or information, there's procedures, some check sheets and some other documentation that will work in conjunction with the HSEQ pack in totality to ensure that businesses are meeting their obligations under the Act to maintain a safe workplace.
Thanks, Peter. Another question here, just to let you guys know, we are reaching our last 15 minutes. So we'll answer these last few questions and we'll go from there. So this is for you, Nat. How is the 30% reduction in income being determined, i.e. compared to previous month, and what evidence is the government going to want to prove this in June?
Peter, I think this one might be for you based on what we were talking about before.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, well, they're just obviously the government will be looking at, well, the tax department will be looking at your same BAS statement this time last year to see that there's a 30% downturn. If you haven't got one from the same time last year, it's at the discretion of the tax commissioner, so he may look at a previous BAS statement. But they're going to be pretty fair and reasonable about it because, you know, they'll be able to see reasonably easy that there's been a downturn. Some people lodge monthly, some are quarterly. So depending on your lodgement frequency, that's what will be looked at. And I know that there's a lot of people in the tax department that have sort of ramped up workers and teams to start getting through that as quickly as possible. So because they've had a lot of inquiry and a lot of applications in the first few days.
Thanks, Peter. Another question here for you, Matt. Do you have to be completely closed down to stand down employees?
Thanks, Amy. It's not a requirement that the whole workforce is closed down to stand down employees. As it currently stands, that's not the information that's been provided. It is a tricky one because given that this pandemic is unprecedented, we don't have a lot to go off. There's going to need to be some flexibility around this, but again, you just need to demonstrate that you were required to halt work and you needed to stop work based on the events that have unfolded. So I think you need to reasonably demonstrate that there was no ability to continue work. So whether that be company-wide or within certain functions, I think at this stage, because there's no clear decision or ruling on that, there's going to be some flexibility, but it is important to not, to note that you can't just go around standing down employees just because your numbers have dropped. For example, there might be other solutions that are more appropriate. You would have seen with, the major airlines, they're obviously in a position where they can no longer fly. So the stand down there is quite clear. Under Section 524 of the Act, the employer, for example, Virgin Qantas would not have been able to continue work, and there was no productive work for those employees to do. And that's why they have been stood down in accordance with that section of the Act. So it really comes back to demonstrating that there's no way that you could continue on your work as you normally would.
Thanks, Nat. A question here for you, Peter, in relation to the question that you answered before. What if March income is normal, but April is reduced by 50%?
If you haven't got it same time last year, we'll look at prior month or prior period. Again, it'll be at the discretion of the tax commissioner. That's what we've got at the moment, to determine that you've had a downturn in your business. So your statements that you're lodging through your accountants will be pretty critical in determining that element.
Thanks, Peter. Another question here. If local government change the restrictions for trades, would they make distinctions with essential and non-essential work, power loss, call-outs, etc.? I think that might be for you. Yep.
Yeah. So, Amy, can you just repeat the question, please?
Yeah. If the local government changed the restrictions for trades, would they make distinctions with essential and non-essential work, power loss, call-outs, etc.?
Well, I deem by local government they're talking maybe about state government. State government obviously will working with federal, but at this stage, obviously the guidance of essential work, as the Prime Minister has said, if you've got a job, you're essential. So that's essential work. So the whole idea at this stage is state government and federal government are working not to shut down business as much as possible, to keep certain things running, like job sites and construction sites, and as much industry and commercial businesses running as is safe to do so. So at this stage, if you're working, you're deemed as essential, and obviously if numbers continue to rise in terms of infection numbers and so forth, and they go to another stage, well, that's an assessment that obviously they'll make in line with advice from the Chief Medical Officer and make any further restrictions. But they're doing their utmost not to go to what they would term a lockdown like Europe have done, because obviously the impact that does to the Australian economy and Australian businesses. So they want to keep people working as much as possible. So yeah, if you're working, you're essential.
Thanks, Peter.
Add to that, if I could, Amy, that at the moment all levels of government are, in agreement that our industry, the construction industry more broadly as well, does need to continue to operate while we can. So because of the essential role that the construction industry plays within the economy. So both state and federal are in agreement with that, and obviously if changes do need to be made and the essential services are tightened up and no longer include construction, that'll be a decision based on purely health and safety of workers and the broader community. But at the end of the day, if everyone, if all contractors sort of knuckle down and make sure that they're really taking these safety precautions seriously, practicing this social distancing in the workplace and that sort of thing. If we see that the number of cases stabilises, then I don't believe that they're going to look to change anything, and the construction industry will continue. So it's really important that everyone is on board and doing the right thing.
Thanks, Nat. Another question here. So say your major clients are not allowed to open, so you can't continue. Is this enough to stand down employees?
Sorry, Amy, do you mind just repeating the start of that?
Yeah, say your major clients are not allowed to open, so you can't continue. Is this enough to stand down employees?
If it's as a result of a government directive, I would say yes, that's quite clear that that's a case that you are no longer able to perform the role that you're engaged to perform, or the job that you're engaged to perform, and therefore you would look to stand down your employees in accordance with Section 524 of the Act. And then, you would start looking at the contractual implications as well. So potentially be if you've got a force majeure clause in your contract, and then that's when that may come into play as well.
Thanks for that. Another one here for you. So how do you pay job seeker to employees in April without it being approved by the government until June BAS is lodged July 2020?
Look, there's still a lot of information coming out on the JobKeeper payments. I think at this stage, they're sort of trying to keep up and get the legislation, because the legislation in many cases doesn't address this type of payment. So even the superannuation, for example, that area is not all entirely clear at the moment. We'll be working, as more information is released from the government on this, we'll put together a package. But yeah, Amy, what was the final part of that question?
So I'll just read the entire question again. So how do you pay job seekers?
Actually, sorry, I might get you to the member just to email me through that one to workplace.relations@nica.asn.au, and I can have a look into it.
Thanks, Nat.
Okay, Amy, it's important just to also note that the job seeker legislation hasn't gone through Parliament yet, and while it will, there's probably going to be quite a few amendments made to it by the time it gets through Parliament, which will get done in the next few days. So we'll all get a lot more clarity on that once that becomes law in a few days' time.
Thanks, Peter. I've got a question for both of you here. Can you provide clarification around what we as electrical contractors can or cannot do at this time in regards to work?
Peter, it sounds like that might be HMS.
Yeah, well, at this stage, you can still go about and continue doing your normal work, I suppose. You've just got to have these additional risks thought through. So, construction sites are working at the moment. For example, they're putting a lot of processes in place around do they screen workers before they attend site, through getting them to take their temperature. Have they got physical distancing in place? Have they got good cleaning processes in place? Only having 5 people in a construction lift at the one time, staggering start times. So things, you've got to consider all these sort of strategies around how you work. Things that we've talked about, PPE and gloves. What to do if a worker does report with flu-like symptoms, other changes to work habits around vehicles, and additional bins and rubbish removal strategies in place and things like that. So you can still do your same work, it has just changed a little bit in this new world around how we get it done. So there may be a few more steps and hurdles that you've got to go through, but if you do it in a systematic manner, you can still continue to work at this particular stage. And as Nat said, if we're all following the same processes and following the right guidelines of social distancing and staying away from work if we're sick, and making sure that we continue to talk amongst each other, so consult workers and about all the different things that you want to do, normal work can continue at this particular point of time.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter and Nat, for your valuable information today. Sadly, that's all we have time for today. I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope the answers provided clarity for you to operate your business effectively through this uncertainty. If you didn't get the opportunity to ask your question online, please send it via chat now. Excuse me, sorry, or email us at nica@nica.asn.au. We will respond to you all individually. A recording of the webinar will be available on the Nica Vic website. If you want to rewatch and share this with your team, you can also see a full schedule of upcoming webinars. I encourage you to register, even if you can't attend, as we'll share the recording with you. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day.